Good evening, everyone, and welcome to In Conversation. I'm Karen Christensen, Chair of LabourList, and I'm standing in for Emma today, who has unfortunately broken her arm, so we all send her many get-well-soons. This is a new seminar series brought to you by LabourList and the Fabian Society, which you may be able to detect from the posters around us, and we're utterly delighted to have you joining us. For today's In Conversation, I asked Gemini I gave it a little bit of setup and said to tell me something about my lineup today. And Gemini said, "This is a fantastic lineup for an International Women's Day fireside chat." It was not hallucinating, it was entirely correct. So we've got Baroness Dianne Hayter and Baroness Margaret Curran representing two different but highly complementary paths within the Labour movement. One deeply rooted in party governance, consumer rights and the House of Lords, and the other in community activism, the Scottish Parliament and the front benches of the Commons. I thought that was pretty good going. There is some slop in there, but some of it's actually accurate. So I think one of the things that's very impressive about you, and neither of you will say about yourselves, is actually a little bit about your CVs. And I think it's one of the things we as women don't always do for each other, so I am going to very briefly run through some of that. And look, Dianne, you've been chair of the NEC, including at some interesting transition moments, chief executive of the European Parliamentary Labour Party, a rather tricky bridge between Brussels and UK Labour. Obviously, you were General Secretary of the Fabian Society, which is particularly relevant at this moment. Also, Gemini said you were a key figure in the intellectual development of the party at that moment. So there you go. And given that we've accepted it's correct on this, it's correct on that too. Obviously, you've been more recently that shadow deputy leader of the House of Lords, shadow spokesperson for business, energy and industrial strategy, repeatedly. Shadow spokesperson for exiting European Union during a rather critical time, and then Cabinet Office, Constitutional Affairs, Women and Equalities, and an enormously impressive and broad CV. And similarly, Margaret, obviously you've actually been a minister of late for energy security and net zero, and then that very deep history in the Scottish Parliament, including parliamentary business, Minister for Communities, social justice, Secretary of State for Scotland.
Shadow, unfortunately.
I'm trying to do those at some. Shadow Minister for Disabled People, and then the Shadow Minister for Work and Pensions. So welcome, and it's utterly delightful to have you both here and to spend this time with you. Now, I am in conversation with you, but there are also, hopefully, the odd person out there watching this. And so this isn't just between us, but also with you out there as well. So please do send through your questions to questions@labourlist.org, and we'll bring in as many as we can, and Ellie over there will make sure that I see them. So, welcome everybody. So I had a first sort of set of questions that I really wanted to ask you, which were around how did you both get into politics and why? Maybe Margaret, starting with you.
Oh yes, it's quite a wee while ago now. I think this is my 50th anniversary of being a member of the Labour Party. And actually it was completely by accident in some ways. I came from a working class background in Glasgow. My parents had come over from Ireland. I think all Irish people have some degree of politics in them, so there must have been some political discussion in the house. But I had no tradition, nobody was connected to formal politics at all, but I just had a sense growing up of injustice. As I say, we started off in rented housing, then went to good council housing, and I kind of understood that. I was also the youngest of 4 girls and was very conscious of the fact that there was disappointment I wasn't a boy. And I couldn't carry on the family name. That was the end of our family name. And that was kind of a big part of my shaping growing up. But somehow along the line, in my head, I connected what was happening to us with politics. I think not everybody does that, but I thought the government felt very distant, very remote. But I kind of identified with Harold Wilson, I think it was at the time. I kind of thought, he's our guy. That's all, I had that sense of it. So then I went to university, and by sheer fluke, someone came up to me and said, "Would you like to join the Labour Club?" And I thought, that sounds really interesting. and I've been here for 50 years. So would you like to come to a meeting? And I've been going to Labour meetings ever since.
We should thank that person, whoever they were. They did us proud. Dianne, how about you?
I can trump her. I'm 56 years.
Yeah.
You're just an
baby.
arrivist. Well, I was going to be a social worker because I wanted to. Some of the same motivation, you know.
Yeah.
There were problems and I wanted to do something about it. And I mean, it really sounds very trite, but when I first started explaining it, it was instead of fitting people into society, I thought the better to probably get society better to help individuals. And so it shifted. But the big jump was, I was very influenced by my father. I was brought up by my father, and he was a great feminist. He wouldn't have admitted to it, I'm sure, but actually he just treated us as if we were all the same sort of thing. But the big jump was that I did go to university, first in the family and all, first even to do A-levels and all that. I come from a Welsh mining stock originally. And then I was looking at pensions when I was at university, and there was, just as I was graduating, there was a job in the New Statesman, also set up by the Fabians, by Beatrice Webb and Sydney Webb, of course, at a New Statesman to work for a trade union, working on pensions. And having done a whole course at university, I thought I was an expert on pensions. And I went off to work for the General Municipal Workers Union, and of course, after that, you just fall into Labour politics. It's part of being a trade unionist.
Fantastic. Was there anybody that particularly you looked up to or inspired you, or you helped, any characters along the way that shaped that path?
Well, that first boss, Giles Radici, obviously an eminent Fabian, was really important. Important in that first job. He just gave me the confidence to do things, taught me an awful lot. And also then when I applied for the job at the Fabian Society, he acted as my referee for that, and so got me that as well. So very important man. But looking up, I mean, once you start looking at the Fabian Society, you know, you've got Beatrice Webb, you've got Margaret Cole, you've got Shirley Williams. It just never occurred to me that it wasn't a place for a woman, which is interesting. It was sort of easy following all that, and of course George Bernard Shaw, who'd written about socialism in a way for women. So I think the Fabian women were really important to me.
Amazing, that depth of history in the Fabian women's, isn't there? Margaret, any
Well,
particular
interestingly,
characters?
you'll know this person, I think, from your past, but the person I'm going to say was a big influence and a great encourager of me is this kind of, I didn't know anything about politics, I was really out of my depth in some ways, didn't know the language, didn't know any of the acronyms, was a person who went on to be very hostile about women's organisation, and that was Janie Buchan. Do you remember Janie?
I do.
Who was a charismatic woman in the west of Scotland in the 70s and 80s, really, and she was very encouraging of young people. She really helped us, you know, get platforms, learn and think. But when I then became much, you know, influenced by feminist work and started thinking about that kind of thing, she wasn't very happy with me. She got quite cross with me. But she was a remarkable woman. And I mean, I think you see this in history sometimes. Women have an impact, even if they don't want to have the impact that they want, you know, that they plan to have. You know, so they inspire women, they encourage women, even if they don't believe in some of those key principles that maybe you take forward.
It's actually one of the things that struck me looking at both of your very impressive and eminent CVs. I know a lot of things where you have both had huge influence behind the scenes in those quieter moments, in those the chairing of something or the changing of something of minds.
Or the
and
arguing
hearts
for
and
something.
Are there any ones that you know, any situations you particularly remember and were able to tell us about, where that kind of skill set of the kind of slightly navigating behind the scenes and getting a consensus
I remember,
made?
I don't know if this is quite behind the scenes, but one of the things when I was thinking about this is, and I suppose thinking about, you know, having those kind of debates with Janie Buchan at the time, and she was a formidable woman. It wasn't easy to have debates, but it was the times where you were advocating for women's issues to be much more higher profile, and that was hard. You know, the people now who say, "Oh, we always supported it," like, not so sure you did actually. But so I think it's about advocating for other women, and I've tried to all the time say, you know, if they're behind the scenes saying, who should do this, can we do this? I think nominating women, letting women speak, changing the kind of environment so that they can speak and they get their place, you know, and making sure that they're out there. I think that's the quiet work that really matters, really matters.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, I knew, of course, Janie Buchan because she also became member of the European Parliament. So at one point we had a lot of Labour MEPs, and I was trying to keep them all in order.
Oh, good luck.
She wasn't the easiest. Good on her. I mean, I think some of the things that's been possible is to say the things that were difficult at the time. That sometimes we can get away with it, actually. We forget about that. There is a lot behind the scenes. But actually, early on, supporting women-only shortlists, which were not popular. And it helped that I did not want to be an MP. Therefore, it was much easier for me to talk about women-only shortlists. And actually just getting it talked about in a non-threatening way. So I hope that sometimes one doesn't go in completely aggressively. But the other thing is talking, I mean, one of the things you talked about, you know, the sort of charity in the other world that I did, I ran an organisation called Alcohol Concern, and actually beginning to talk about women as being affected by other people's drinking, because we were very concentrated at that time with people with a drink problem, and not always about, and it was usually the women that suffered at their hands, that sometimes just talking about new issues helps other people then talk about them. I mean, it's happened over a different thing recently. I've been dealing about headlights, you know, Glasgow.
Yes,
you know, the real glaring headlights. You just start talking about something, and then you find actually a lot of people agree with you. So sometimes I think just being a little bit brave, rather than always having the solution to things, is something that women are
Makes
quite
politics
good at doing.
real to people as well. I think we've got a responsibility to try and make it real. It's about real lives and changing people's lives. Sometimes in the political bubble, you can get lost, I think, in the jargon, which is what I experienced as a very young person. And I think opening that up and changing that is really important. Getting those connections. We need to be connected to the people we want to represent.
And of course, the early Fabians did that. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, right from Beatrice Webb. She was working with consumers. She was very involved with consumers. She and the co-op very much. She, you know, because that was she was working with very poor women in very poor areas, and actually setting up little co-ops just to buy the sugar together. It was cheaper if you could buy a bigger packet of sugar. It's, you know, it's real basic cooperative principles. And she also, you know, did some rent collecting, and again understood the lives of women. So sometimes just listening and hearing, and then taking life experiences and turning them into policy. I mean, that's what those Fabians did, of course, was seeing a problem and then thinking, okay, so how do we solve it?
What do you think the current issues facing women are, including some of the issues that aren't quite as heavily talked about and that are a bit more hidden? Are there any? Where is this agenda at the moment? I mean, we've got childcare and a few things on the agenda, but what are you hearing? What are you feeling at the?
I think I'm going to lead Margaret to talk about being a mother, and I mean, you know, I think being in politics and being a mother is something I haven't done, and for that, I think the issue that isn't spoken about now, and this isn't to downplay childcare, but you know, women aren't just young women. There's an awful lot of older women. And actually we don't do enough. It is interesting, one of the unsolved issues is social care, and guess what? It's women both who work as underpaid carers, as non-paid family carers, and indeed as older women. You know, it is a woman's issue, and quite often if you look at women's agendas, you see it all about the early years, important though those are, and we forget about the others. So I think that is still, it needs a bit more prioritising. We haven't solved that.
I absolutely agree with that. I think it's one of the big challenges of our time, really. I think, we've had quite a big debate about childcare, and of course that must continue, and that focus must continue. I think maybe we miss a point about the pressure on families just now, particularly low-income families. And I think as Labour women, that's what we've got to contribute, is, you know, that experience of what it's like at the other end of the spectrum. You know, the ordinary women's experience, because sometimes the debate gets too dominated, I think, just by sort of generic women, when actually we have to understand the different experiences that women go through. And I do think there's an issue about low-income families and the pressures they're facing. You know, we've had the debate about the 2-child cap and such like. That's one of the big things. And if you'd asked me this 6 months ago, I might have said, I think violence against women has got a clear priority and we are focused on it, but given everything we've seen about Epstein and all the online debate, I think we're only just beginning to tack up an aspect of that. And I think the whole online debate has changed everything about the experience of young women particularly. But you're right about older women too. I mean, I'm not trying to be, both are right, of course they are. But I mean, I do think we need to really get much further ahead in some of these issues, some of these experiences.
I'm quite glad I'm not young.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's truly frightening when you see what some young girls and women are going through. And it's that kind of connection back to policy that you mentioned, you know, because that's what we do. We think, here's an experience, how can we, not necessarily solve it completely, but make progress on it. And we are beginning to do a bit of that with social media and online, the whole gamut of it. But I'm not sure we've really grasped this. I don't think we fully understand it. I mean, you look at what was in Epstein, and that the woman who was a ghostwriter for the Virginia Giuffre book did an interview, and it really, one of her comments really stayed with me, which was about these were rich, powerful men, and they used poor women as prey. And it was their poverty mattered as well as their gender, you know, and they were so exploited, these young women. And I think they've got to really start, and that's just one example of it, but it's pervasive throughout society.
If we feel, and we have made a lot of progress, we've got a female chancellor and that kind of thing. But I'm just wondering about your reflections on what you think has changed in the debates and what things haven't, you know, from that enormous kind of experience that you've had in this realm. So what any areas that have changed, do you think, where we have made progress, but also areas, in a sense, what you're saying about the online harm stuff is...
The good thing about the Fabians is they are positive. I mean, I've always found that's why I would participate in the Fabians. That's why I subscribe and pay money dutifully to you all the time. And LabourList, actually, because I do think it gives you hope. And it is our duty, I think, to be hopeful and positive as well, given this week. I mean, I think we could... I mean, it's very difficult to be resilient, and we are resilient people, I think. But the thing that has mattered most to me and has changed my life, I would say, is the sisterhood I experienced. Because when I started getting involved, I knew nothing and felt completely out of my depth. Other women made it easier for me and helped me grow. I was staying in the House of Lords. I mean, I know, don't quote me on this, it sounds that out. But you get sisterhood and people help you, they encourage you, they make you feel political, and yet you can have political impact. And I think we hopefully offer that now to a network of other women coming through. But we can make progress, and we do. I mean, we have transformed lives, and the fact that there are so many women now, not just having a position for the sake of a female chance, a female, you know, blah, blah, blah. But those women, you know, are taking that understanding into everything they do. That they see the women there that before people weren't seen. They understand that experience that wasn't understood before. And I think that makes a huge difference. I know as a minister, and I could bore you to tears with different things I know I made an impact on because I had that perspective.
Give us a couple.
Well, I would say, I remember the first thing that ever happened to me as a minister. I got an email from a civil servant who put forward a panel of nominees, you know how we nominate people to public bodies and such like, and it was all men. And I sent it back and said, I don't do that, you know, you'll need to give me some women as well. And he wrote me back a really cheeky email saying, I'm sorry, we do it on the basis of merit. You know, and so anyway, so that helped me actually pursue that.
We're not allowed to swear on this, are we?
And the other thing was about funding. I mean, I put Rape Crisis Centre in Scotland on national funding because I just shifted resource and made it happen. And I know that in some work I did in housing about prioritising the homelessness experience of women, that it made a difference having women around as ministers.
And any ones that you...
Not particularly for me, but I think it's the same thing really as Margaret just said. It's having women in positions where they use those. I mean, the real increase of women doctors and of women lawyers means, you know, when you go to either of those two, particularly if you come from a working class background, they're already pretty intimidating. Yeah. You know, you go to a doctor. I mean, where I come from, South Wales, you know, my aunt would never have questioned a doctor because, you know, but actually once you start having a woman there, then it's easier for them to talk and to be heard. And it's the same if you're in trouble, or whatever, and you go to a lawyer. Seeing a female lawyer who listens, who just knows your life story better, I think makes a difference. So I think the work we've done, it might be a bit indirect for me, where I've helped, I've done quite a lot on legal training and on various other professional work of getting more women in. That in itself didn't make much difference. But the women that I helped get in, I think then the women that they are seeing, whether they are lawyers or judges or doctors or anything else, or people taking decisions in how you run schools or in how you run hospitals, getting women into those positions, they're the ones making a bigger difference than I will ever make.
I remember when I was at school, our physics teacher said women shouldn't do medicine because they can't do the job full time, and they will go off and have children, you can't have doctors and that. Now, that's in the space of my lifetime. That's revolutionised. Absolutely, people just wouldn't have those attitudes. Or, people wouldn't question the credibility and authority of a female doctor anymore, or a female lawyer. So there have been really important changes that have other, consequent changes down the line.
But I still go into meetings sometimes and see a whole platform of men.
Yeah.
That's
And what's interesting,
it's
creeping back. And what's interesting, if I say I'll turn to a man sitting next to me if I'm in the audience and say, "Have you noticed there's no women on the platform?" And they go,
"Yeah."
"Oh, so there isn't." They still haven't noticed.
Yeah.
So we've still got.
For second nature to us to notice.
Yeah, we just notice. As we walk into a room, we notice.
But you're part of it or not. You feel part of it or not.
Yeah.
I think some of that is also slightly nudging backwards as well.
Yeah, the backlash is real.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there, and we're beginning to feel it now.
Yeah.
Are there any particular areas you're feeling it in?
Oh, I'm in the world of politics, and I'll tell a little story. And this was during the Brexit time when I was the Shadow Minister for Brexit, and we were working across party, and we had a group around the table. And the leader in the Lords, we were in opposition then, is brilliant. Angela Smith is one of our brilliant people. And we had a very good relationship. We were having a difficult thing if she would deal with it or I would deal with it. And, we could work like that. Anyway, she was trying to argue a particular thing around this table and wasn't getting through at all. And they were still resisting. And so I came in, which I didn't normally do. I would leave it to her or vice versa. I couldn't get it through. And then one of the men said, we should do that. And the others went, "Oh, yeah." And
even at that, you got to scream.
And the youngsters sitting around, because I'm afraid the politicians were at this table and all the support staff were around there, and they just burst into laughter because they saw it. It was very funny. So it does still happen. I mean, it's a certain age group, but it is also younger men as well. I think some of the backlash is from younger men. I think they are feeling that we have been over-promoted. They wouldn't use those words. But there's a sort of feeling that we are feeling entitled, which, given after centuries of them being entitled, is quite hard to take.
I still think there's a sense of as well, which we, I'm sure, have experienced of when you advocated for women's representation, women's rights, whatever it was. People say, yes, I agree with you, but not just now because we've got too many other priorities. And I think there's a real sense of that around just now. And I've done a lot of work internationally in between the parliaments I was in. And women internationally really experience that, particularly in areas of conflict where, God, there's so many other things we need to deal with. You're quite right, of course we should have more women, and of course we should think about childcare and such like, but no, we need to deal with this first. And I think that's creeping back.
And it's really odd, because if you want to put someone into a difficult area, put a woman in.
Exactly.
Cathy Ashton,
you could do with more women around.
One of our colleagues who did the original Iran deal and that, I mean, just put a woman in the room. I'm really sorry, but there's certain things we're rather good at. Yeah. I know we're not meant to say that. We're meant to say we're equal with men, but actually sometimes we're a bit better.
Well, the evidence backs it up.
International Women's Day would definitely allow.
But when you look at women's involvement, if they're involved in peace negotiations and conflict, they're more lasting and they get more public support. So you're right.
I'd love some more of your reflections on the comparative work you've been doing across different countries. What are the issues that you've experienced that were in common?
It falls in part of it is just how far back we are in terms of women's representation and the issues that women face when they are, even if they get into some parliamentary chambers, the levels of misogyny and behaviour that hold women back, and just some of the cultural practices that hold women back and how real that is. I mean, you look at what's happened in Afghanistan as one of the most severe experiences of that. You know, that women's rights are still questioned across the world, and women do suffer enormously in terms of access to education, access to political rights, access to health, and all the stats will back that up. So that's part of it. The other part of it is just how alike we all are and how we all engage. We all say the same things. I mean, I've worked in about 20, 30 different countries, and we ask people, why did you get involved in politics? What do you want to do? What's your experience? We all say, what are the barriers? We all say more or less the same things. I don't get listened to. You know, my issues are not important. I get trivialised. I think I've got something really to say I can do here. You know, I mean, our system is does provide some opportunities for women to come through, and some systems do that, and that it's not connected enough to communities, and then some women are deeply excluded. But it's amazing just how alike women are across the world, I think. Yeah. And it's very encouraging in some ways. There are such brave women who are fighting in the most difficult circumstances to organise politically and care and organise around other issues that, you know, in their communities. Yeah, it's encouraging in one way. It's challenging and depressing, but it's very encouraging as well.
You mentioned Afghanistan. I mean, it's just
horrendous.
And actually, it's somehow not prioritised.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't talk about it.
We talk about other countries, we talk about other areas of dispute, but you know, it must be almost the worst country in the world now.
Yeah, where women are denied secondary education.
And now they don't want to train doctors, so that, you know, and yet women can't be seen by a male doctor. I mean, this is really serious stuff. Not allowed to go to school, can't go out without a male relative. And in Iran as well, you know, people getting beaten for not wearing the right clothes. And I would like to see some of our political activists prioritising that a little more than perhaps they do.
It is a stark reminder that things can go well.
I think that's it. Quickly. You think you've negotiated at a certain level and then they slip back.
There was an interesting thing I saw about showing, you know, women, it happened to be in Iran, you know, how they dressed over the last 40 years.
Yeah, I saw that,
You saw that one, and of course they became, now it doesn't matter that they became westernised, they became dressing the way they wanted to. So I'm not saying someone should wear this or that, but it's when they're not allowed to do what they want. That if you can't do that yourself, then you have no agency actually over anything else. If you can't choose how to dress, frankly, you can't really choose the rest of your life either.
I had to drive a car in Iran once, and I have to say it was one of the driving with a full headscarf on was really difficult for me. I found it really hard work.
You want to use your eyes for driving. You didn't know that, did you? Yes.
I lost my peripheral vision.
One of the other issues I picked up, I was really surprised at this actually. I was over in Northern Ireland as part of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Women's Network, and we were taking down Stormont. I'd never been in Stormont. I was really excited about it. Oh, it's great. You know, bits you've seen the TV and such like. I'm a real geek about all these things. And what was it? And they picked, you know, the Dean Paisleys and Mark McGuinness and all these people around. And there was no, and they did a bit about the Good Friday Agreement, and the Mo Molam's picture wasn't at all. Nobody mentioned Mo Molam at all. And I thought, you know, to me, she's a really key person in this. You know, I think it's really interesting that women get written out more easily as well. You know.
And her combination of humour and insight.
And I think in a lot of parliaments I've seen, the women do a lot of background work, but they never get the credit for what they're due, and they're not seen as political leaders. They don't even see themselves as political leaders, but they are.
Yes, because the wonderful May Blood no longer with us. You probably knew May Blood, who was, you know, incredibly influential, and she was, you know, put into the Lords, and some people were surprised, you know, and yet here you had one of the absolute key women over the women's movement there, and quite rightly put into the Lords. But there were those who raised their eyebrows at what's she doing there, you know, worked in the mill, now she's in the Lords. Yes, worked in the mill and now she's in the Lords. She was wonderful.
I had a few things I wanted to ask you really that were around, you know, we've got the Boys Club is being mentioned again in the newspapers, and at the senior levels of the party it's being discussed a lot. And in a sense it was ever thus, right? But I'd love your reflections on specific changes in treatment of women that you've seen, and specifically as Labour women, what you think we should do about the current moment, because something's going backwards, something's going forward. But like this current situation we're in, what is our responsibility as Labour women there?
One is to champion what's already been done. I do think it's important that we show it makes a change, because what I'm really worried about is the next generation of women coming up. That, you know, one gets, I mean, we all get, you know, people applying for jobs, internship. Very, very often it's men. So we do have to show to women that actually it made a difference that we were there, and therefore we should, not our own trumpets, but we should blow other people's trumpets, because they've got to see it's worthwhile. And I am somewhat worried about young women, that they're not coming forward and writing and doing the things that, you know, of the first stage. So I think that's really important. I think the second thing is that we need to make sure this isn't just London, because if you look around local government in London, we've done pretty well actually on women. You go out to some of the other regions and really women are underrepresented in local government. Yet that is, it's the stepping stone to national government, but it also is very often exactly the issues that women are very good at. So I do think we've got more to do in getting younger women involved in their communities. And it's difficult. You know, Margaret talked earlier about the families, you know, the difficulties for families, the cost of living crisis, you know, the worries about education and health. And then ask those women, oh, by the way, would you like to stand for the council as well? You know, this isn't easy. So we need to make sure that we make it easier, whether it is by, you know, looking after families so they can do that, whether it's times of meetings, it's still, you know, our meeting times are not very flexible. So there's lots more to do yet in the party to make it easier, let's say, for the next generation.
And what advice would you give some of those young women who either want, whether it's public office more broadly as well as kind of Labour politics more narrowly?
It's first of all, I'm not going to be dishonest. It's hard work. You know, you're not going to get to the top of anything, whether it's a career or anything, unless you're prepared for some hard work. But the other advice is, it's incredibly worthwhile. It's enormous fun, so don't hold back. You know, be ambitious. It's okay.
And I would say, you don't need to be perfect, and you don't have to do everything. When I did my international work, we used to do, you know, you often say to people about leadership amongst women, and they would always, of course, say, oh, you know, Margaret Thatcher, they were inspired by her, her name would come up, and Angela Merkel and all the, Michelle Obama and all these, and I used to say, that's not your role model, because you're not, all you need to be is as good as the people in your parliament. You don't have to be Michelle Obama or Angela Merkel to actually, you know, participate in politics, because I think women expect themselves to be perfect all the time and always put themselves under great pressure. So I think it's about relaxing a bit of that. Just to reference your earlier point as well about what can we do, I think part of the problem is because political parties are quite an unusual space for you know, engagement and participation, you know, because we're not really regulated in the sense that workplaces are, or, you know, public bodies are, or such like. And I think that's how a boys' club network can thrive a bit more than possibly it could in other places, or it doesn't have the scrutiny perhaps it needs to be. And I think political parties need to think about that a lot more. I think we need to think about internal processes and, you know, thinking about why, and trying to look at why do some people do well in this organisation and some people don't. And I think now we need to modernise and think through a lot of our, you know, internal cultures as much as anything else. You know that phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Yeah.
And I don't think we've given enough attention to that. So I think a lot of people can come in and thrive in it and do very well in it, but I think for people who are perhaps a bit more reticent, a bit more unsure, I think it's harder. So, and I think there's a big debate about looking at the transparencies and behaviours of political and culture of political parties.
That's really interesting, because what, you know, we the Fabians used to do, and so did the Labour Party, was political education.
Yes, indeed.
And
that benefited from a lot of that over the years.
And also we used to train people how to chair meetings.
Yeah.
And that didn't mean always picking on the loudest speaker, which is who they sometimes can be.
Yeah.
But, you know, really with the meeting, try and go around everybody and call them to speak. You know, don't wait for someone to put their hand up. And it can be quite, you know, the first time you're asked. There's an old civil service way of doing something with meetings. You you know, you're going to suggest some, you know, a strategy or something, and you go to the most junior person around the table and ask their opinion first, because it's then much easier for a senior person to say, well, that's really interesting, but, you know, there may be another way of looking at it. But if the tallest or the oldest or the most experienced speaks first, then it's really hard for a junior person to say, well, actually, I disagree.
Yes.
So I think helping people be able to come up with different opinions, I think is helpful to women, because I think it is intimidating the first time, and the first time you take on a loud man. But very often, you know, we've all done it. We've been there's an audience, and you ask for, you know, questions, and the first hands to go up are the men's. It still happens. So it's.
I used to always make myself, even when I was thought, I'm not very good at this at all, I made myself say something at every meeting. I really had that. I think someone must have advised me to do that somewhere, I don't know, because I wouldn't have had the confidence to do it. And it's that, you always say, confidence does really matter. Every woman in every event will tell you, I don't have enough confidence. And you think, we can't all be that. You know, it's more than that.
Fake it till,
But we do need to address that kind of, you know, that kind of intuitive feeling of always having to prove yourself that women have.
One of the things that's always struck me, and I've been trained in lots of participatory techniques, which are all about, they're partly about extracting information, problems, you know, they're also crowd control. That how do you keep the quieter voice? We don't train people in those techniques, and that being part of people's toolkit would immediately transform meetings, because you have the confidence to go in quite a hostile situation. Anyway, with ways of them.
And that begins to change the culture.
Yeah.
You know, that aggregates up.
I think that conversation about cultures are really interesting. It's not a word that you hear very often in the Labour movement, when every commercial and or not-for-profit organisation I've ever been close to, advised, led, has always had it as a really big conversation. And it feels a little bit trivial in Labour circles somehow, but as you say, Trump's
well, coming from the
strategy
west of Scotland, where it is actually quite a male-dominated kind of aggressive culture, dare I say, and I need to think back a lot, because that's my culture as well, you know, and women participate, that's women's culture, but it doesn't always serve us, you know, so, you know, challenging your own culture is important, you know, that kind of things, without losing perhaps some of the advantages of it. I think it needs a lot more thought. And
the ability to surface a more explicit conversation about it, because it feels like it's
yourself
normal.
more. You reflect on your own culture and behaviours. We've all got to do that, I think. You know, just because we're women doesn't mean to say we couldn't have improved things for other people around us, other women particularly around us.
I'm very aware that we've got a bell coming up that we need to get you guys to. I think is there any advice that you would give your younger selves? If you'd only known.
If I'd only known.
I'll start with mine if you're not careful.
You go then, you go.
Don't wear high heels. They cripple you. Do not wear high heels. I wish myself had known that.
Whereas mine would have been wear them higher.
That's interesting.
I found the size of, you know, I am small.
Petite.
I am a little small, and actually, you know, I spent lots of receptions spending all my time looking up like that. So I think I would have been more ambitious. I mean, people are going to find that very odd. They're going to look at me where I am now. But actually, I came to the Fabian Society, and I would have just stayed here for ages and ages until, you know, there was the catastrophe of the SDP, because it never occurred to me that there was anything in the future. It never occurred to me to stand for Parliament or to apply for a bigger job. I was actually, surprisingly, very unambitious. And then things happened. You know, I happened to stand for the NEC, but I didn't see that as a career move. It was to stop. Sorry, it was to stop the left getting there. But but so things happened to me by accident. Now, it's hard for me to say it would have been different, because I cannot imagine that I could have ended up in a better place than I have done. You know, it's been wonderful. But actually, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't actually have those women around me. I think I would have maybe plotted a bit more. Luckily, the accidents for me went very well.
Well, all the evidence shows that women do better when women need encouragement to stand for things. Women do need that tap on the shoulder to say, you should do this. And I mean, in every walk of life, that's the case. Women just don't come through it if left on their own. I think my advice would be, it's a point you made earlier, Dianne, is you can take your time. You know, life's long, and politics is, the one thing about politics is you can do it when you're quite old. You know, you don't get thrown.
As we're finding.
You don't necessarily get thrown. You have to retire at 55 and never be seen again. So, you know, you don't need to rush at everything. And I think I was always kind of, it's my nature, I think, as well. It's always got, everything's got to be done. It's urgent, you know, there's always. And I think you can take your time. And I wish I had just taken time to learn a bit more and think things through a bit more. I didn't study as much as I should have when I was at university. And I wouldn't.
You weren't out enjoying yourself or something.
I know. I'm going to Labour Party meetings, maybe not. But I would, you know, I think you've got time to do things, and also, of course, that has to be particularly for, you know, that interface between class and gender. It is about encouraging people to find their own voice and speak their own voice and be confident in it. You know, that's still an issue for women, that they need to be legitimate. And I wish I hadn't been quite so anxious and so scared about it all. So I would say, don't be scared. That's what I would, take your time and don't be scared.
Perfect. I think on that note, with a few moments to get you back to voting, thank you both so much for an utterly amazing chat.
That was so interesting, thank you.
Pleasure to do this, and a real kind of treat. So a huge thank you to you both. And just before we head off, I want to leave you all with a little teaser, which is our next one of these is with a very, very special guest. Perhaps the ultimate Labour grandee, someone who is the best Prime Minister we never had. And it's going to be a truly unmissable conversation. And it will be with Emma again, who will be back from her woes at that point. However, this next event is going to be exclusively for both Fabian members and for those who have joined the soon-to-be-launched LabourList membership scheme, which we are calling Friends of LabourList. So if you'd like to be in the virtual room for that, which I would highly recommend, do look out on social media and on the LabourList website for more information about how to join and how to get involved. And thank you for spending a very special evening with us. And we look forward to welcoming you back to the next In Conversation. Thank you. And thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.